So dad, around the time, I think we was in junior midgets. I'm pretty sure it was my junior midget year. And dad wasn't able to come to a lot of the football games we was having. And that year I was actually doing real good. Like I was one of the star players. Well, the whole team was a star. We didn't have a first offense and a second offense. We had A and B. Basically, like both of these are starting offenses and defenses. Well, anyway, we were playing New Britain, and you know how big that rivalry is. And everybody else in the Mighty Mites, Junior Pee Wee, everybody lost. But anyway, so first kickoff of the game, I'm looking for him. He ain't there yet. So I'm actually receiving the ball. I catch the ball, start running. I see him coming in the gate. He see me running. He running to the fence. I see him. I'm juking and doing all this and that. Make it touchdown. First play of the game, I scored a touchdown. Kept on running and ran into him. You know what I mean? He hit me on the helmet at the fence. That was like one of the dopest moments of my life right there.
Welcome back to the Beauty for Ashes podcast. I'm your host, Destiny Ireland, and I welcome you all to chapter 3 of the book of Matthew. So far in this series, we've learned about Matthew's early life, growing up in the Brass City, and establishing himself as a one-of-a-kind business owner. We talked about his unique style of cutting hair and how it combined with his love for people, which shined through in the way he ran his business. In just a few years of opening a barbershop, the name Tiny was becoming a household name, not just in the city of Waterbury, but in the entire state and beyond. It seemed like everywhere he went, someone recognized him. And they didn't just recognize him, they recognized his family too. Here's my brother talking about being Tiny's son.
It was a celebrity to me, because everywhere I went, they called me Tiny Son, so I was popular everywhere. I go to North End Rec, I'm getting treatment from the people, good treatment, because that's Tiny Son right there. Give him a snack. That's Tiny Son.
Yeah, I felt the same.
Football, basketball, whatever I was in, it was always somebody like, oh, that's Tiny Son right there. Even up Long Hill, going outside in our neighborhood where we lived at, just go outside to ride bikes. People drive by. Oh, that's, what I mean? They know me from my dad, especially all older guys too. It was mostly, that's the reason why I would get the love from the younger kids. Because even if the younger kid didn't know me, he see his OG like showing me love. He like, well, who's this dude? Like, you know what I mean? Oh, that's Tiny Son. He don't even know who Tiny is. It was always like that.
So I definitely relate to my brother here because my experience growing up as Tiny's daughter was very similar. Although I didn't necessarily feel the same way, here I am talking to my mom about this, who had her own experiences as Tiny's wife most of our lives. TJ said he had a celebrity dad.
Yeah, he's true.
Everybody knew him as Tiny's son.
Yes, and knew me as Tiny's wife.
Right. And me as Tiny's daughter.
Yeah.
And it's funny because me and him are so different. And so he loved it. TJ said he loved that everybody knew who he was, like immediately. Like he didn't have to introduce himself. Like people already knew. And I said I hated it.
So did I. I hated it too. I used to, when people would see me, they go, "Hi, Tiny wife."
Yeah.
I used to say, "I have a name."
Right. In a lot of ways, we all felt a sense of pride about my father's success in the public eye. But the way that we dealt with it was very different. When I was doing these interviews, I loved seeing my brother light up while talking about how proud he was to have a somewhat famous father. It was a point of view I never fully thought about because, as I said to my mom, I never really felt that way growing up. Perhaps the biggest reason I hated the attention was because I was a very private person as a child and now. And my relationship with my father really had nothing to do with his career as a barber. It could be because I'm a girl and I never got haircuts, but more likely it was because I thought he had so many other hobbies and things that he did with us that were so much cooler than just cutting hair, although the haircuts were pretty cool. Up until this point in the series, I've tried to highlight some of those aspects of him that combine to make him a really cool person, but especially a really great barber and business owner. But in this episode, I want to spend time highlighting the Tiny that I grew up with, the husband, the father, the family man.
As a family, he was a really good dad. You know what I mean? You know it yourself, because you know he would do anything for y'all. You know, he would I can remember he would bring y'all fishing. He'd bring he would even for TJ, my nephews. He would bring my nephews along.
Yeah.
For you, he'd take Tyshell.
Oh yeah.
You know, and he had
Tyshell.
no problem with it. Like for Tyshell, for Levon, for Rodney.
Yeah.
You know, they would stay over and he would take y'all places.
My brother and I are my parents' 2 biological children. We're the only ones. But we are so lucky because on both sides, we had so many cousins, you know, through my parents' siblings. And we had a very unique family in that we were always together with our cousins. I mean, pretty much every week, multiple times a week, we were always together. And when I thought about family, like in class, for example, when they ask about your family, I would always think about what someone else might call the extended family. And I would name like grandma, my cousins, everyone, because they were so much a part of our lives. And one of my cousins my mom mentioned is Tyshell. And Tyshell is really like a sister to my brother and I. We were always together. And she's actually my dad's goddaughter. And so she, like I said, was always with us. And she has her own experiences that we got to talk about. So here she is talking about some of her times with us and my father.
Tiny used to when we were little, we was into church. For one, every Sunday, Tiny would pass us money. Tiny would pass us money, and we all had to put the money in the bucket. He'll pass us a mint or gum, whatever he got in his pocket at the time, that's what throughout church. After church, we'll go out to eat, and then we'll go to Straits Turnpike. And there we will do miniature golf. We'll do like the water bumping cars. It was something like that. And then like Burlington Turnpike. And then we'll do the batting cages. And I feel like that was like almost every other Sunday we were going there. But we're definitely going out to eat every Sunday.
Tyshell brought up some really great points and things that we did, especially on Sundays. And Sundays were definitely my favorite day of the week because my dad was home with us. He worked a lot. And he would pretty much be out of the house Tuesday to Saturday, nonstop, like all day. Sometimes I would go to sleep and I wouldn't see him. So on Sunday, when he didn't have to work, we would go to church and we do all those things that she talked about. And I loved it. I loved every second of it. Now, eventually, I knew I would get to this point. And there's a hobby that my dad was absolutely obsessed with. And we've got to the point in the podcast where we just need to rip the Band-Aid off and talk about it.
And he loved fishing. I can remember when we used to go as a family. We used to go fishing as a family.
Yes.
At first, I liked fishing. And then he just loved fishing so much. He had so much patience to wait to catch a fish. And I would sit there and like, you know, reeling and reeling. And then I get bored because like, the sun would be so hot.
Yes.
And even you would get bored.
Oh, yeah.
And like, all right, we had enough of this.
Yeah.
You know,
we had to do other stuff.
Yeah. And so then now when it was time for him to go back fishing, you and I both would be like, no, we don't want to go. You know, once in a while, yeah, we would go. And then you would go with him without me because I'd be like, you guys go, because, you know, I wasn't as interested in it. And I can remember me telling him that. I said, you made me uninterested in fishing because you don't know how to stop.
Yep.
I was like, so since you don't know how to stop, Now I'm not interested in it anymore.
Now, I started this pretty negatively, saying ripping a Band-Aid off, and I apologize because my mom and I were definitely easily burned out by fishing, although I was happy for my dad that he had something that he loved so much. And with that being said, my brother was again on the other side on this, and he actually really loved it.
So at the beginning of my life, he went fishing so much. That's all I ever wanted to do was go with dad to go fishing. And to be honest, a lot of times I couldn't go. Nah, man, I'm going out with the Mighty Reels. He had a fishing game called Mighty Reels, and it was him, Matt. I think Uncle Jerome was with him. His boy Todd. Another one of his friends, Mills. Yeah, they all was down with Mighty Reels, so he would go out fishing with them, and I'd be wanting to go, and be like, nah, man, not this time. Maybe next time. You know, it got so intense where every time we passed, it was Blockbusters back in the day. Now it's Eblin's over there.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it used to be Blockbuster, but whenever we would go past there, I would swear we was gonna take that right hand turn and go up to the lake. And then sometimes he would go straight. I'll be pissed off. Dad, I thought you was going that way. Nah, man, we not going fishing today. Like, damn.
It wasn't unreasonable for my brother to expect to always be going fishing whenever they went a certain way home. And that's because my dad loved fishing. I mean, it's the understatement of the year to say loved. If there was a word that was beyond that, I mean, I would use that because he dove all the way in when he started to fish.
All in on fishing. And in the basement, he had fishing pictures. Like, I remember he bought this fish.
The singing fish?
Yeah, that moved and sang. So anytime somebody would come in there, they would talk, the fish would move.
Yes.
And the music would play.
I remember that.
Oh my God. He was really into fishing. And then he would try to get the kids into it because I can remember for Christmas and stuff, he'd buy fishing poles.
Yes.
Or either fishing game or whatever it was. He would buy all kinds of lures. Every time we would go shopping, he'd be in the fishing aisle just getting everything, you know, for fishing.
Okay, so I just want to clarify here for those who don't know much about the fishing world. She's talking about lures, Lures, and they are the things that you use to catch fish. If you're not using like live bait like worms or something like that, there's all these fancy, you know, different lures that look like other animals or plants in the water.
He would just play inside the tackle box with lures. You know, but he wouldn't put a lure on the pole and cast it out. He'd just be flipping them over, man. I remember this back in the 80s. I had this lure right here. With me and Mills used to use this. Like, man, put on the lure already and cast it out.
I didn't know he did that. That's funny.
He would sit there because he has so much ammunition as far as fishing goes. I mean, so much. So many lures that wasn't open, lures that was open, 5, 6, 7 of the same lure, different colors. You know, Dad spent thousands of dollars on fishing equipment.
So he loved fishing so much that he obviously got all the tools that he needed to fish. And he didn't really care whether he was on fresh water or salt water, but he definitely obviously needed water. Eventually, he got to the point where he decided he was going to get himself a boat. Remember that time he took us on his boat in Kwasi? And then there was something that went wrong with it. I can't.
It was always something that went wrong with the boat.
What was it?
If something went wrong with the engine, it's a no-brainer because every one of the boats float. They all float good. It's just that you can never get the engine running.
One of the things that we really haven't addressed so far is that my dad really loved a deal. And when I say loved a deal, he would find mostly things that were probably someone else's trash and try to fix it up and then use it as his own. He really didn't like to be wasteful. And so he would often drive around town and find things like boats and cars and try to fix them up the best he could and then reuse them.
One was like a boat. The other one was like a canoe. The canoe they fell out of it. Him,
Yeah.
I believe it was Matt, and it might have been Todd Jones. I'm not sure. Oh, Jerome said he was there.
Yeah.
Because when they fell off the canoe, they had to swim ashore.
Yeah.
And they had on all their clothes, and at this time they did not have on
life
jackets. I never forget when he came home. He said, I almost died. And I was like, why? What happened? He was like, we fell off a canoe. He said, and then when they were going, they used to wear their Timberland boots.
Yeah.
They had on those hoodies, those thick hoodies and jeans. So when they fell off the boat, they had to swim ashore, and they weren't that close to the shore.
Yeah.
So they had to
My
swim.
gosh.
And he said by the time he was able to touch the ground, he just fell.
Crazy.
Fell because they were so tired because swimming from there with all that stuff on them.
Yeah. I remember he said the boots was filling with water. It was heavy.
From that day forward, he put on his life jacket every time he got on the boat. He also took a fishing course. Okay. He took a fishing course and got a license.
Yeah.
And so then that way, if ever like the what do you call it, the Coast Guards, came, that they would know that he was licensed to run the boat and stuff like that.
Oh my
gosh. He got into like the safety of it. You know what I mean? Like he really was like involved with it, like knowing he could tell you anything about the boat, fishing, the water, the fish in the water.
Yeah.
Could tell you anything about it because he also took classes. Like he took things like one step further.
Yeah, I think he was what you would call a student of life, right? Like where somebody, everything that he encountered, he needed to understand
exactly.
it fully.
That's exactly what I was getting ready to say, because I could remember, like, if we went to a museum, I would go into the museum and, I'd look at, the pictures or look at the statue. He had to go over and read about it.
Yeah.
He would go read about it, and he would show the kids, this is such and such, come from blah, 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 whatever. I remember that time, the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Remember we went to the Basketball Hall of Fame and he had to read every picture that was in there. Like, come on already.
That's what it's there for.
Yeah, and that's what it's there for. But he stopped at every last one of them.
Yeah, because
before
he needed
we
to
leave.
learn.
Yeah, and then the same thing. Like,
it's never enough. It was never enough. He always had to learn more.
More.
So as I said at the top of this episode, it was very strange to me to be some sort of celebrity because of my dad, and for him to be so well known for being this super cool, representation of hip hop and graffiti, and he was a DJ and all of these like super cool things, because the dad that I knew was a very different kind of dad. I mean, he was cool to me, but it wasn't because of, the ways that other people thought him to be a cool person. I thought he was cool because he was kind of a nerd and I was kind of a nerd. He really had this thirst for knowledge. He always wanted to learn more. And this really resonated with me. It was one of my favorite traits about my dad because I am the same way. I love nerdy things. I love documentaries. I love to read obscure books, and he would always bring them to me. If he found something that I was interested in that literally nobody else cared about, that was what he was going to be giving to me for a birthday present or a Christmas gift or just thought about you kind of thing. And that was something that he did even as I got older. And if I'm honest, I really missed that part about him.
He was like a very humble, modest person because, like, what do you call it? Material things didn't mean much to him.
Yeah. Material
things did not mean much to him because I can remember a couple of cars that he had.
Oh my goodness.
I know one of the cars that he had that you could not stand because when he used to pick you up from school, he'd be so proud. He'd be so proud driving an old, what was that old Oldsmobile?
Was it the red truck or the yellow car?
He had the big yellow one and then that red truck. Yes.
Yeah. A lot of this stuff happened when I was really too young to know what was actually going on. So I was actually really curious when I was listening to the tape from this interview and wondering what exactly were those cars because they actually were pretty important in my life. My dad taught me to drive in the yellow car. So I went back in his records and I couldn't find any information on the red truck. I do know that it was a Ford of some kind. I don't know the year. I would guess it was definitely not like 1980 or anything after that. I would guess before 1980. But the yellow car, I was able to find exact records, and it was actually a 1971 Pontiac Bonneville. And as I said, he taught me to drive in this car. And y'all, if you've never seen this before, take some time to Google what this car looks like and think about what it would have looked like in 2008 when I was learning how to drive. Just picture it. It was horrible. But as you heard us say, he was so proud of this car, and he was proud of that horrible, ugly red truck as well. And I think it was because he could appreciate the fact that these were like 30-year-old cars and they were driving, like they were moving. And he did that. When he got those cars, they weren't working. And he restored them. He got them to do what they were doing 30 something years ago in the 2000s. And he was really proud of that. And now that I look back as an adult, thinking about what it would take to get that done, I'm proud of that. But at the time, I was mostly just annoyed.
And I can remember, you know, he would be satisfied with those cars. When I first met him, he had an Altima. And that Altima was in his mom's name. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he had that car for a long time until he got into a car accident with it and totaled it. Mm. But then after that, he wouldn't get a new car. That I actually ended up buying him a car for Christmas.
I remember.
I leased the car from him for Christmas, and it was leased. And I told him that. I was like, you don't have to keep it. It's leased. You can give it back in 3 years. And sure enough, after 3 years, he gave that car back.
but we took many trips.
Oh my
in that
God.
car.
But when we got that car, we took so many trips.
Yeah.
Like he would drive because he loved to drive.
Yeah.
We would drive like down to Virginia Beach. What's the other place?
We went to New
South
Jersey,
Carolina, New
South
Jersey.
Carolina. We went Virginia, all along the East Coast.
Yeah,
pretty
all
much.
along the East Coast. Yeah, it was great. I mean, he was just like a normal. We were just like a normal family. You know, because when we get on the highway, start arguing on the highway because he's driving too fast and don't want nobody in front of him.
And we didn't have GPS then, right?
Exactly. Oh yeah, and he's the one that taught me how to read a map.
Yeah, had to use a map.
Because
he taught me how to use a map.
Yeah, he had an excellent sense of direction. Mm-hmm. If we would get lost, he would say like, "This is north. I got go back to this way, west, or whatever." And I'd be sitting there like, how in the hell do you know which way we're going?
And I got that from him as well, because you say it to me now.
Yes.
I have a good sense of direction.
And then also, anytime we would go to like any amusement parks, he'd make sure that he had to stop and get a map of the amusement park so that we would do this in a fashion that was orderly. You know what I mean? We got to start from here, and then we're going to go around, you know what I mean? Go around so that we don't miss anything. Yeah. Yes. So that we didn't miss anything.
Like he did have fun, but it was like organized.
Yeah.
The things that he liked, if you think about it, collecting cars or fishing, he liked chess, he liked music, the art, like he enjoyed many things, but it was definitely things that you could have control over in some way. Like it wasn't, he wasn't out doing wild stuff or, things that made sense. And like, he really liked football because he was like a student of the game of football too, mm-hmm. So like he really understood the rules.
He's the one that taught me. Yeah.
He became a coach because he really understood the plays and how,
and
how to do
that's
a game.
How I knew about it, because that's how we all became Steeler fans.
Yeah. My dad was a huge football fan. And for as long as I can remember, he has been a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And when I say he is a Steelers fan, I'm talking about the kind that goes into a locked room and yells at the screen for the entire duration of the game. I'm talking about swinging terrible towels during every major play that the Steelers make. I'm talking about a complete disdain for the Baltimore Ravens. I'm talking about blasphemy if you dare say that you support the New England Patriots despite living in New England. All right, I'm being a little dramatic. He was pretty friendly. I don't think he would really be that upset with anyone for being a Patriots fan, but he was definitely a Steelers fan, and his family had to follow suit. But he didn't just watch football, he also coached it. It was a flag football team called the Killer Bees, right? Did he do the Killer Bees?
One was the Killer Bees, but one of his last teams was called Stunners. That's what
Stunner.
most people probably gonna remember.
Okay, yeah. So he did different, he coached a couple different teams in Waterbury, and he had a very specific coaching style, right? Like he wasn't always yelling as far as I could tell or whatever, but I know he always had a black and mild in his mouth. All right, so just to clarify, I mentioned black and mild. He always had a black and mild in his mouth. And what I meant there was that he always had these tiny cigars. They were made like a cigarette, but they were actually a cigar, and they had a wooden tip that basically helped to keep it in your mouth. And so he would always kind of bite on the tip. In fact, even when it wasn't lit, he would still hold on to it like in between his teeth. So I just had to emphasize that there so that you had the imagery as my brother tells the rest of this story.
Listen, the funniest thing, one day I was at work and my man B.O., hopefully he hear this, he remember this story. He know daddy real good. And he was like, man, I went to that football game. He was like, man, they was whooping your dad team by 44. He said, Tiny still sitting there with the black and mild in his mouth calling plays. He said, I told him, Tiny, call the game, throw the towel away. He said, he still got that notebook open. He said, 44-0. He said, Tiny got the black and mild still calling plays. He said, I told him, Tiny, because you got to think about what type of league this was. This wasn't like, it was legit football. I had a referee and everything, but this was guys running to the sideline, sipping on a 40, forget Gatorade, you know what I mean? Running to the sideline and go hit a blunt. Like this was that type of league. So you got people that ain't even supposed to be on the sideline making noise. And he yelling at daddy, Tiny, call the game, man.
As funny as that story is, it really represents another core character trait: perseverance. It didn't matter to my dad whether his team was winning or losing. They had a game to play, and they were going to play until the end, no matter what. And that's how Tiny lived his life. Whether it was finishing a football game or swimming to shore after his boat sank, he was going to survive. He understood something that many people never fully learn: that life isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. Why rush a haircut when you can take your time and get it just right? Why speed walk through a museum when everything in there is strategically placed to teach you something important? Why just go to church and go home when you can spend the rest of the day doing fun things with your family? In the final chapter of the book of Matthew, we'll reflect on the legacy that he leaves, which extends far beyond his barbershop on Cook Street. I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode of the Beauty for Ashes podcast.